Hello, welcome back to Slim Does Tech. Today we have a slightly different video than my usual tutorials. We're going to do more of a podcast sort of format. I have a special guest with me, my cousin. Hello, cuz.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Today we're going to talk about the importance of backups. And the reason we're doing it this way is because I've had a very serious hardware failure and my hard drive in my main computer completely fried itself. And I've had to spend the last 2 days recovering the system back to a working state. Now, I did have a backup solution in place. In fact, I was using Microsoft's own built-in backup option, and it failed me miserably. So we're going to look at some other backup options, and we're going to explore them together. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Excellent. So first I'm just going to show here the built-in feature that I used to back up the system previously. And it's this in the control panel, if you're in either small or large icons view, backup and restore Windows 7. The Windows 7 in brackets there just means that this feature was introduced with Windows 7 and is now deprecated, which I only found out after the fact. And Windows, or Microsoft I should say, don't actually recommend this process, even though they still include it with the latest version of their operating system. They recommend a third-party backup solution, which is what we're going to set up today. But what I did previously and what I don't recommend is clicking in here and creating a system image. So what a system image is, for anyone who doesn't know, is it takes your system hard drive and takes an image of it, or a snapshot. So it's like taking a photo of that drive as it is at that point in time. And then that image can then be restored onto either the same drive or a different hard drive to restore your system back to its working state. That all makes sense? So far?
You know, all the things you've taught me over the years, I have never done this.
You've never done this, and that's why you're here, you see, because what I do, you copy, which we've learned, right? So I'm going to be setting up my own backups today, and you're probably then going to want to do the same thing yourself.
Well, obviously,
Yeah.
I will always do what you tell me.
Good stuff. So the point of taking a system image rather than just backing up the files is that you can, in this life, you can only spend two things. You can spend time or you can spend money. And when it comes to backups, you're probably going to have to spend one. So you can spend the time to set up your system the way you like it and to, get it to your liking, install the software that you need, set your settings up, do the tweaks and things that you do. But, if you've been running that system for a couple of years, that's a lot of tweaking and a lot of software installs and a lot of things that you've done to it. So it's going to take you some time to get back to the state that you had it in before the problem that caused you to have to restore your system. And that's what I've had to do over the last 2 or so days, is to manually reinstall a lot of software, set things up the way I like it, etc. The other option, as I said, is you can spend money. And if you purchase a good backup solution or a good backup software, that should save you a lot of time when it comes to restoring your system. And you can approach your backups in whatever way suits you. We're going to discuss some of the different ways of backing things up. My preferred method is a full system image. And as I mentioned, that takes the entire system, so the drive that Windows is installed onto, and backs that whole thing up. There are some shortcomings to it in, the fact that the backup will be huge in size. You cannot take an image and then restore it to a smaller drive. So if you have a 1 terabyte hard drive that fails and you only have a 500 gig hard drive to replace it with, a system image may not work. There are some ways around that. I'm not going to get into them. You can shrink a system image provided that there is free space within the image to do so, but that's way out of the scope of what we're going to talk about today. But Google's your friend if you want to go down that route. What I like to do is take a full system image and then replace the drive with a drive of the same or larger capacity and then restore the system image afterwards. And in that way, you should go from your system set up nicely the way you like it to a critical hardware failure to then having your system back to the way you like it in a very short space of time. Sound good?
Sounds good. Can I just ask, would this apply to somebody who is, let's say, very techie like yourself and does a lot of techie stuff? Would it still apply to someone who's just like a daily PC, laptop user who does a few emails and writes a few documents,
So there are a couple of ways to approach backups. My preferred method, as I said, is a system image. For the less technical, maybe not the less technical is probably not the right term to use, but someone who doesn't tweak their system as much as I would, or isn't as particular about how things look and feel and that sort of thing, backing up just the files is probably enough.
That's what I do to the cloud, and I think I'm doing okay with that.
And if you don't mind just having to take a little bit of time to maybe reinstall Windows or install a few bits of software that you use if your computer breaks and you need to buy a new one, or you need to replace the hard drive or whatever it might be, and then all your files are in the cloud and you just have to wait for them all to sync back down to the new machine, that's totally fine. There are no wrong, that's a lie. There is a wrong way to back up stuff, and that's to not do it. Right?
Yeah.
And with backups, it's do it now. Don't wait. Yeah. There is no waiting when it comes to backups. Do it right now as you're watching this video or listening to this. Do it now. Make some time. Plan ahead. Make a backup in whatever way, shape or form you feel is the best way for you. But do it now before you need it, because when you need it, it's too late. Okay.
Yeah.
So for backing up files, as you mentioned, because there are plenty of options out there. You have Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive. You can even run your own hosted cloud storage solution if you want to go down that route. So I personally run a home server, and I can set up I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but there is a home. Let's just do what I always do and go to Google and look it up. Home cloud storage software. Nextcloud, thank you. That's the one I was looking for. So Nextcloud is basically a free version of the likes of Google Drive or Dropbox, but you host it yourself. As in, you are the one who runs the server side as well as being the client or the user of the software. Because I have a server, which is a separate computer to my main computer, I could do that where I could set up my backups from my main computer, go to the server via Nextcloud. Now, that's not what I'm going to do today. I'm just going to do a much simpler solution, which is just to back it up to a network attached storage, which, for those of you not in the know, that's just a hard drive that's connected to your network through some sort of interface. A lot of routers these days, the router being the box that provides your internet and your Wi-Fi connection, will actually have a USB port on it. And you can generally plug in an external hard drive to that and turn that hard drive into network attached storage, which means what's on that drive then becomes accessible to everything within your network. So now that's something completely outside the scope of this video, but it's an option, and it's usually, I wouldn't say a free option, but it's probably something that a lot of people can do with stuff they already have.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I personally have a NAS, which is a box that has a couple of hard drives inside in it, and it has an operating system that I can install apps to and run services through. My one in particular is an EX4100 from Western Digital, and it's just got a load of hard drives thrown into it and gives me a lot of storage that's then available on the network. And depending on what services I run on the server, some of that storage is available outside of my network. So because you happen to use my Plex server to watch all those legally obtained videos that we have up on there, and that's accessible outside of my own local network here, because Plex delivers that data outside. We're getting a little off topic, but that's my setup.
We are, sorry.
It's a good background to the method that we're going to follow today. Is to know, like, if you're taking a backup of your system, or even taking backups of just individual files, having them on the same computer where the original was is totally useless. Because if that computer gets stolen or the hard drive fails, then you have no backup, because the backup was right beside where the original was. So there is no backup. So when it comes to backups, the general philosophy is 3-2-1. You should have 3 backups of your crucial files, in two different mediums. And when I say mediums, I mean they should be on different methods of storage, that being hard disks, CDs or DVDs, or the cloud, or, you know, if you want to go to tape. And yes, people do still back up files to tape, because in case you didn't know. And then one means that the three is three backups, two is two different mediums, and the last one then is that at least one should be off-site. It should be somewhere other than where you are.
Yeah.
So 3, 2, 1 when it comes to backups.
Yeah, that rings a bell actually from when I worked in the dental surgery, and we'd have the backup at night for the off-site backup.
Exactly. You take all of the crucial information, you put it onto a storage medium, whether that be a hard disk or tape or certain diskettes like zip drives they used to use back in the day and all that sort of stuff. And then that data then goes somewhere else. It leaves the building, it is somewhere else. So I approach backups in two different ways. I back up crucial files to the cloud. That's my offsite backup, and it's one of the two mediums because it's not a medium that I control. I pay Google a few quid a year and have loads of storage space on Google Drive. Crucial files are up there. My system, my computer, my Windows install and its software is the system image that I'm going to create today. And that's my backup method. Everyone has their own theories and whatever way they want to approach things themselves. That's the one that works for me. I'm lucky in one way in that I have the time to reset up a system if I need to, or I can at least dedicate some time to it. And my system is not a work system. It's not a critical, it's a gaming and messing around system more than anything. So, you know, if my system goes completely boobs up, then I'm not losing money because of that, right? If you're talking about a critical system, a business system, your work computer, depending on who you work for, they should be the ones who take care of backups. But if you're independent, if you're a contractor, whatever it might be, take backups. Have your system backed up in some way, shape or form, because the day it goes, the day something dies, is the day you'll need that backup. And if you don't have the backup ready to restore on that day, you are going to lose money and potentially lose clients and lose business. And you know, you don't want to encounter that situation. And one last kind of point of theory before we get into the practical side of things is that when it comes to digital storage, that is files, things that are stored on CDs, DVDs, hard drives, SSDs, USB sticks, whatever it might be, those things are not permanent. I think a lot of people have this idea in their head that, oh, it's stored on the computer, it'll always be there. That is not the case. When it comes to mechanical hard drives, that's the old style spinning hard drives, big chunky beasts if you ever see them in person. It's said about those drives that it's not a case of if it'll fail, it's when. They will always fail eventually. It might take 10 years, but it will fail. So anything you have stored on hard drives will eventually disappear from those hard drives. Now, you might not think...
So is that kind of then why they say, oh yeah, that laptop's past its shelf life kind of thing, you know?
Sort of, yeah. There can be, you know, things you can do to get use out of a very old hard drive. They're not completely useless after a certain point in time. But it's basically... The idea of the point I'm trying to get across really is that if you have something stored on a hard drive, it's not going to be there forever. Yeah. So if you have an old laptop or an old hard drive that has files on it that you want to keep, you need to back those up somewhere else as well. Yeah. That hard drive is not your backup. It's one of your backups, but it is not your only backup. 3, 2, 1. Yeah. 3 backups, 2 different mediums, 1 offsite. So and there's also another thing that a lot of people don't know about, which is called bit rot. So bit rot is when the bits, the actual ones and zeros that everything on computers are made up of, start to degrade. And eventually any computer or any operating system is not going to be able to put those ones and zeros back into the right way, into the right shape to make your family photos reappear. So bit rot is a real thing. If you store stuff on old hard drives, old CDs and DVDs, they will eventually rot away. And you'll put that disk connected to your computer or put the disk into a drive, try and get the files that are on it, and they just won't be accessible anymore.
Okay, that's interesting. It won't happen to all our grunge CDs, will it?
They're probably backed up somewhere by Spotify or YouTube Music, so I won't worry too much about that. But that leads me on to actually backing up an entire system. Not going to look at backing up files because there are plenty of other resources on the internet of how to back up individual files. Just, if you're using Windows, from Windows 10 onwards, you probably already have OneDrive set up and running, and it's probably already backing up your files. Most people will have a Google Drive or Dropbox or Box.com account. There's lots of these services out there. Just look them up, sign up for their free tier, and away you go. Just do be aware, as is the case with all services that you use on a computer, is that if it's free, you're the product. Your data or your personal information is being used to generate that company money in some way, shape or form. Just always keep that in mind. Facebook is a free service, you're the product. Facebook is not a social media company, they're an information company. They sell information, that's how they make their money. And it's your information they're selling. So just always keep that in mind. If I ever recommend signing up for a free service, it comes with that caveat. So just use it as at your own risk. And this video, by the way, before we get into any sort of technical thing, this is to be a warts and all. This is me going through the process live, basically, as it happens. So it's not going to be a streamlined tutorial with everything worked out ahead of time. There might be hiccups and problems that we encounter along the way. And hopefully this video will actually serve in some capacity to help get over those hiccups, but also just the methodology that you follow to troubleshoot these things and solve these problems as you come across them. So, my first step when it comes to doing anything on a computer that I don't already know how to do is to Google it. It might sound ridiculous, but that is the best way to learn new things or to learn how to do something that you don't already know how to do. And I'm looking for the cheapest, and as I said, that's either cheap in time or money, or preferably both, cheapest method of backing up my entire system. And I want to take a system image. That'll be one large file that gets stored elsewhere that I can then use to recover my system if and when I need it. So the most important thing to remember when Googling things like this is look at the website address that the search result comes from. So the heading, the headline, like the headline on a newspaper, they're attention grabbing. They always look like it's the thing you want. But it's the source that's important. Do you know this source? Do you trust this source? Yeah. I can't tell you what to trust and what not to trust, but websites like Tech Radar, PCWorld.com, ZNet to a degree, these are Tech Advisor. These are websites that are known. They're a known quantity. They're generally trustworthy. Now, don't hand them over all your data and all your money, but I would take what they say generally as being correct or accurate to a point. Softwaretestinghelp.com, never heard of them. First result on Google shows you a nice preview of everything here. I have no idea who that website is, who's writing for that website, whether they're trustworthy, if they know what they're talking about at all. But they've obviously paid Google some sort of money to say, if someone searches for this thing, stick our website at the top, will you? We need more traffic. We want more money. Yeah. So be aware of those sorts of things. I'm using an ad blocker here, by the way, so you'll not see the usual ads that you would see at the top of a Google search, and for good reason. That's somebody paying to have their search results pushed up the page or promoted by Google, and it's a practice I don't quite agree with. For smaller websites and stuff, of course, throw Google a few quid and optimize your results and things like that. But always check the source and make sure it's someone you trust, or at least you've heard of before. So we're going to look at Tech Radar. Yes, we accept the cookies. Thank you. And you can see as well that this is a recent article. There's no point in trying to use a piece of software from 15 years ago if it's not going to work. Like I did with Windows' own built-in backup and restore from Windows 7, And you can see here it gives you some different options of ways to back up your computer. I'm not going to go through this article. I'm not going to sit here and read this thing out for you. But there are a lot of options out there, and I've dabbled with most of these, I would say, especially in the last few days. But the one I'm going to go with actually isn't mentioned in that article, which is kind of unusual, but it's Macrium Reflect. So the reason that we're going with Macrium Reflect is because it's free. Or at least it's free for a single user. And you don't need to pay out money to make a system image, which is good. And we're going to try this today. So you can see here, creates images of running Windows OS. That's what we're after. We want to create an image of the Windows install that's on this computer. You can use it to restore non-booting systems. It's scalable. We won't worry about that. Boot your backups into Hyper-V or VirtualBox. Covered VirtualBox, if you remember, in my first tutorial. You can take a system image of your own computer and make it a virtual machine.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a very interesting way to look at computers and systems, is that this is a Windows install running on what we call bare metal. It's installed on the hard drive and it's seeing all the hardware that's in this computer directly.
Yes, I remember. Sorry. Yeah.
So I could take that Windows install, make a system image of it, and then put that into a virtual machine. So make my virtual hard drive the same as my own Windows system here. Awesome. And it is based on Windows 11 Rescue Media. And I use Windows 11 at the moment. So if you're using a Windows 10 operating system, this should also work fine. Haven't tested it, but it should, in theory. For older operating systems, just upgrade. Don't back it up, just upgrade. Okay, so I need a personal free license, and it's asking me to put in my email. So I'm going to not show that on camera. And we'll pop the email in over there. And would I like to receive news about it? No, thank you. You're fine. My email address was on screen, but who cares?
It was quick.
It was so quick you didn't even see it, and it's not like you can go back and pause the video or anything. I'm glad Gmail have good spam filters in place, so yeah, we won't need to worry about that. Okay.
Not a fan of Gmail.
No?
I don't like the look of it, the aesthetics of it. I prefer Outlook. I just don't know. It's literally an aesthetic thing. I just prefer to look at Outlook.
You can just put your Gmail address into Outlook.
I do, yeah, I do.
Okay. That's fine. Just saying.
You've taught me a lot. There's loads more to teach, but you have taught me a lot.
Yeah, there's plenty to teach. Speaking of which, I need to open my Outlook. Okay, thankfully that just opened directly on the other screen. So, and look, there's all my email addresses again. I'm going to have to edit this video now and take all those email addresses out. Lovely. Okay, here we go. Doo-ba-doo-doo-doo-doo. Okay, so we have the download now, or at least the download agent. So this is a common theme when it comes to software installs these days. It's not something I personally like, but it makes sense. Instead of downloading the software and installing it directly to your machine, you download an installer or a downloader, which then connects to the network to download your stuff and install the software that way. It might seem, well, what's the difference? The difference is if you're using a computer that you don't necessarily have admin rights to, this can throw up issues. Whereas if you can just download the install directly and install it, you might be able to contact your IT department to get the admin rights you need to install the software. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we are going to go ahead and download the free version and install it. And like I said earlier, this is a kind of a warts and all video, so this is as it happens. This is not going to be a nice streamlined sort of tutorial or anything like that. Yeah, we'll have to suffer with US English. Do you think we'll manage? Yeah, I think we'll be all right. We'll log it and we'll hit next. So, okay, Next, not going to read that. Oh, look, there's my license key. I better blur that out too. Personal use. Yeah, we agree. That's all fine. Nah, we won't bother registering. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Instant VM booting of Macrium backups. Nah, I won't worry about that. Okay. My guess is what that is that it's their own sort of virtual machine manager. So like VirtualBox that I used before, that would allow you to mount the image that you've taken of your system as a virtual machine. But I'm not worried about that. I'd be able to figure that out anyway if I needed to. Okay, so this is an old interface that I've seen a long time ago, but it does appear to be exactly what we're looking for. Do you understand any of this?
I've just want to say to you, so tell me, I've seen something like this before years ago, so tell me what we're looking at. Yeah.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is a visual representation of each of the hard drives that are inside my computer. So hard drives are detected by the operating system in different ways. So Windows will detect drives and usually assign them a letter, like C is where your Windows install usually goes. Bit of trivia in case you didn't know, the A drive was the old 5 3/4 inch floppy drive, the B drive was the 3.5 inch floppy drive, and then the C drive was when internal hard disks were introduced. So that's why Windows to this day is still installed on a C drive, because A and B are reserved for the old floppy disks. Anyway, the Linux will pick these up as, you know, SDA, like SATA device. I can't remember exactly what SDA stands for, but it'll give it SDA, SDB, STC, and then each partition within those drives would be SDA1, SDA2, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We're not dealing in the Linux world today, but just know that hard drives, although Windows will show you a C drive and a D drive and whatever other letter it gives it, that's not anything to do specifically with the hard drive itself. That's how Windows looks at the hard drive. Okay. So when you're using a piece of software like this, it might not show you this is your C drive, this is your D drive. You need to be able to determine which drive is the one you want to clone by looking at the other information about it, whether it be the make of the drive, the capacity, how it's formatted. But thankfully, Macrium have decided to give each of the partitions their drive letter. So you can see here that disk 3, you'd expect disk 1 to be where Windows is installed, your very first disk, right? But in my case, it's disk 3. And the third partition on that drive is my C drive. That's my main Windows install. Now, you're probably wondering what these other boxes are around that. So this is the C drive here, but there's other stuff going on around it. The way hard drives work is that the hard drive is just a load of blank pages. You can imagine it like pages in a book, okay? For any operating system to be installed on that hard drive, it needs to be formatted. You probably have heard the term formatting, I'm sure, at some point. And when you format a hard drive for a Windows install, now Microsoft takes care of all this, or whoever built your computer, whoever made it, will have done this for you. But for a Windows install, certain partitions need to be set up, and then you will have one large partition in the middle, which is where your Windows install goes. So you have I think it's 100 megabyte partition right at the start of the drive, then usually a 16 megabyte blank partition, which is this one here. Then you have a large amount of space, so that is kind of everything except for the very last bit, which is a 500 or 600 meg recovery partition. This is all created by the Windows installer when Windows is being installed. So you don't need to worry about what these are or what they do. Generally speaking, in your day-to-day life, you won't care. But the disk itself is not your C drive. One partition on that disk is the C drive. So backing up the C drive is fine, but that's not a system image that you can then put onto a new drive. If your hard drive fails, you need to take the entire disk, all of the partitions, stick them together in one giant system image, and then pop that back onto a new disk when you need it. So although we have our disk shown up here and our 4 partitions shown up here, we want to make sure that we're operating on, or we're dealing with, the whole disk, not just any one partition within it. These other drives, by the way, are just various storage drives that I have in my computer. One is just game installs, so it's called games. The second one is, if you look at the Macon capacity here, it's probably very small on the screen, but it's a SanDisk 1 terabyte SSD. Funny story, I ordered a couple of things off Amazon. They sent me 2 of everything I ordered. And one of the things I had ordered was a 1 terabyte SSD. So,
nice.
Yeah. And I, did the moral thing. I contacted them, told them what had happened, and they said, yeah, it's fine. You can donate it, or you can keep it, or you can dispose of it. I was like, well, I'm keeping it. It's a terabyte hard. So I have my 1 terabyte SSD called Games, and a 2 terabyte SSD called Thanks Amazon. So that's how I can tell which one is which. I love it. The last one then is just a 500 gig M.2 drive. So M.2 drives are the new format for hard drives. They are like a stick of chewing gum. They're about that size. They're very, very small. In fact, our viewers won't be able to see this, but I can show you because I happen to have the failed one from my system right here. But basically, you can imagine it like a stick of chewing gum, like double mint or juicy fruit or whatever you might see.
Wow, tiny.
But they are quite small. They connect through this new M.2 connector. This happens to be an NVMe drive, which means it's faster. And they connect directly to what are called PCIe lanes, which goes directly to your computer's CPU. So they tend to be much quicker than any other sort of hard drive. New consoles, Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, all use similar types of storage or expand their storage using NVMe drives because they are super fast. If you want a very fast Windows install and operating system, NVMe drive's the way to go. But you can't just put them onto any old motherboard. You have to have relatively new components in your computer to run one of those. But again, we're getting very sidetracked here because we got to get back to the task at hand. So I need to figure out now how we image this disk. And would you look at that? There's a button right here. It says image this disk. Now what I need to know is, does this take the partition or does it take the entire disk? Now, the wording here, disk, to me would mean the entire disk, not the partition. So let's go with that and see what happens. Look at that. Look, it shows you. Look, beautiful. I love a good interface like that. It's showing you this entire disk is selected and each of the partitions within are also selected. And now you can see this drive here is 1 terabyte drive. You can see after formatting the capacity is 931 gigabytes, but the total amount selected is 356 gigabytes. Okay, so although we're taking a system image of the entire disk, it can actually shrink it down slightly and make it so that your backup is a little bit smaller. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of free space on our C drive here. Okay. It might be a little confusing the way these are displayed, but if you look at the capacities at the bottom, this first one, which is no name, is 100 megabytes in size. That's quite small. 16 megabytes is even smaller again, as I'm sure you can work out. And the last one is 611 megabytes. So between those, the first two and the last partition there, it's less than a gigabyte. Whereas the middle partition here, the C drive, is 930 gigabytes. So although in the display here it looks like, oh, well, that's about half the drive, it's actually about 90% of the drive, if not more. It's 93% of the drive, right? That's how maths works, but only 356 gigabytes of that drive have been used. So the Macrium software seems to be smart enough to just not take an image of the blank space or the blank sectors of the hard drive that don't have any data written to them. So that means my backup will be smaller than the terabyte of the entire drive. But I'm planning to set this up to be a recurring backup. So for the system to take a backup maybe once a week or so, commit it to my NAS, so it's in a separate location, and then that backup will grow over time. Because as I put more files on this computer, install more software, games, whatever it is, then that backup will grow in size. So don't take it that your backup now is 356 gigs. It's not going to stay that way if you set up a recurring backup. If you don't set up a recurring backup and you only take one now, that means that when you go to restore your system in a year's time, you'll be restoring it to a year-old version of your system. So recurring backups are almost as important as having any backup at all.
Yeah.
So one backup is great if you plan on breaking something the next day. If you kind of just need it as your actual backup for when your system goes kaput, set up recurring backups. And that's usually, recurring backups are usually a feature of paid software. The other way to do it is to set a reminder for yourself to go and manually run your backup once a week. So you can.
Why would we do that when we have such technology?
See, this goes back to, you can only spend time or money. You can spend the time doing the backup yourself, or you can spend the money and have the system take care of it for you.
Yeah.
So there's your trade-off. Do you want to spend the money, or do you want to spend the time doing it? I think, if I'm right, we've cracked it here, and this might do both and save us both the time and the money. But we won't make any promises till we get to that point, okay? So
let's see how it goes.
So as I mentioned earlier, if you're taking a backup of something, whether it be your entire system or a file, you don't want that backup to sit right beside the thing that you're backing up, okay? Because if you have two files inside in a filing cabinet and that filing cabinet goes on fire, you're not getting any of those files back, right? Same goes for computers. You need to make sure your backup is somewhere else. Okay. Now, when I say somewhere else, that could be a different hard drive that's inside the same computer, inside the same box, or it can be in a network attached storage, or in the cloud, or wherever you want to put it. Or an external hard drive is a very common one as well. So our destination folder, we're going to see, can we get to my network attached storage? So in Windows, we click on Network, and hopefully we should see my EX4100 show up here. Because it's network storage, it's not going to be nearly as fast as a hard drive that's inside your computer.
Yeah.
But for this, we don't care how fast it is as long as the data is there when we need it. And would you look at that? We have a backups folder already. Now, I'm probably going to need to pause the video here again at this point, because I need to get my backup credentials. So give me a sec. So we've set up our destination folder here, which is on my network attached storage, and a backups share that I've created on that. If you need to know how to do that, go Google it, because I'm not telling you here. But just know that if you have more than one computer, you can actually set up a share, which is a folder that you then share to the network, and have one computer back up to the other, and that other computer back up to the first one. So you can have your backups kind of cross over between the two machines. It's not ideal because they're both in the same place. They're not off-site, but it's better than nothing. And it also means that if one computer is stolen and you buy a replacement, you can then back it up from the image or the backup that you take into the other computer. No one uses CD and DVD burners for backups these days, and I do not recommend it. I already mentioned bit rot, and also the cost and the hassle of trying to get blank CDs and DVDs these days. They're not on shop shelves.
I've always got blank CDs.
Well,
always.
Yeah, you would but
I love the CD player, playing the CDs, and
that's all well and good, but not when you want to restore your system. You don't want to.
I get that.
You don't want to wait for those slow DVD read speeds to restore a terabyte amount of data. You know, and how many discs would you go through to back up a terabyte of data? I think dual layer DVD was 8 gigabytes. That's pretty much the largest capacity DVD you can get. If you're talking about a terabyte of data. Now, just for context, when I took a backup with the Microsoft system that doesn't work anymore, it was less than 100 gig. So you might be talking 10, 20 DVDs, but do you really want to have to sort through 10 and 20 DVDs and as you're restoring your system, sit there and watch it and swap the discs when it asks you and all that? Don't even bother. Go buy a cheap external hard drive. Use that for your backup if you have no other option. But there are plenty of options. If your computer has more than one hard drive in it, back up to the second one. If you have another computer, back one up to the other. If you have the cash, you can purchase a software solution that will allow you to back up to the cloud. And that's highly recommended if you have the money to spend. I just prefer not to spend the money if I can. And as I said, I have my own NAS here, which is technically an off-site backup. And, if my house goes on fire and it destroys the NAS and the computer, I've got bigger problems. So I'm not really worried about where my data is at that point. And like I said, my most crucial files are also stored to the cloud, which is my offsite backup in that eventuality. Yeah. So backup file name, we're going to call this backup. Today's date,
19th.
Yep, of the 5th, 2022. Now, I tend to put file names like that without any sort of punctuation, special characters or anything. Depending on the system you're using, in this case we're using Windows and the Macrium Reflect software, some applications and some things that you might encounter at some point in time don't play well with file names that have spaces or certain special characters in them, things like that. Also, the metadata of this file should contain the date that it was created, which you always see when you're browsing the files, the date they were created. But I just throw it in the folder name anyway because it's easier to see depending on how you're looking at these files. I have ways of looking at files that are on my NAS on my phone, which doesn't always show me the metadata in the view. So if I just have it in the folder name, it makes it much easier.
Yeah.
So we're going to click on next. Before we proceed too far, Cuz, are you following here? Is everything making sense? You think you'll be able to watch this back and repeat this process for your own backups?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
Excellent. That's what we want. So we're going to create this backup based on a template. Now, I am going to spend a little bit of time here just explaining what these terms mean, at least my understanding of them. I'm not an expert on all of this. I would know a good bit about a lot of things, but not everything about anything. So the one that I'm going to be using anyway is a differential backup. What a differential backup is it takes a backup of the system now, and then recurring backups will only include the differences from the original backup, so that those backups are much, much smaller, much faster, and you generally don't have to worry about like a recurring backup slowing your system to a crawl or preventing you from working on the computer while the backup's been taken, because if it's a differential backup, it should be fairly quick because it's only looking for files and areas of the hard drive that have been changed since the last backup. Let's have a quick read of some of these and see if we can make head or tail of them. So none is, as I said, if you are going to set a reminder on your calendar to come and do a backup once a week or once a month or once whenever you feel like it, then you would say no, you're not going to schedule any backup. So grandfather, father and son. Daily incremental son, weekly differential, which is the father, and monthly full grandfather backups. Okay, so that's a term I've not come across before, but it makes sense to me. Do you have any idea what that might be? It's okay to say no.
I love a challenge. I suppose, would that be used by like businesses, maybe? Big businesses, like where they'd have a lot of data, maybe? I don't know.
Potentially, yeah. Now, I would say big businesses are not going to be using free software for their backups.
I'm talking about the terminology.
Yeah. Well, an incremental backup is just, it takes a backup now, it then increments on that backup, but it doesn't check for differences.
Okay.
It will do that every day. A differential backup is, as we've already discussed, takes a backup, then looks for changes, backs up the changes. And a monthly full backup is just taking that system image again, the entire thing as it is at that point in time. Okay?
That's why I think it might be for something big like a hospital or something, you know? I could be wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
The size of the system being backed up, or the number of systems being backed up, or the amount of data in it is irrelevant to these options. This is just what schedule you're going to use and what type of backup you're going to take at each point during that schedule. So I was going to use a differential backup, but I think I'm actually going to go with the grandfather, father, son backup because I recently upgraded the NAS and I have loads of free storage in it. So I'm not worried about it running out of space. If I was worried about actual space, gigabytes and terabytes of hard drive space, a differential backup might be a better option.
So for me, I would probably do that one, the differential probably.
Possibly, yeah. Now, as we mentioned earlier, because you might just be happy enough backing up your crucial files to the cloud and not have to worry about any of this. But if you do, like me, if you want a full system backup, if you don't fancy spending the time to rebuild your Windows system and, you know, install all the programs and tweak these settings and, you know, put your start menu on the left hand side but your icons in the middle and, you know, all that kind of stuff, and remember how you did it all in the first place, then full system image is the best way to do it. So an incremental backup is a full backup created periodically, followed by daily incremental backups. We're not interested in that for my use case. Intradaily backup, I think, is just going to be the same thing, but on a different schedule. Oh, wow, every 15 minutes? Do you really need your system backed up every 15 minutes?
That could be medical data.
Potentially, I suppose, yeah.
You know, a patient comes in, you fill out their files, you know, half an hour later, they need those files for a referral.
Yeah, true. And if your system crashes in the time between and you can't remember what you put in, that makes sense, okay. So an incrementals forever is an initial full backup, and then it looks like just incremental backups added on from there, and it saves a lot of hard drive space. As I mentioned, we're not too worried about hard drive space at the moment, so we're going to go with the full grandfather, father, son method, because I do not want to spend 2 days rebuilding this system again when my hard drive dies. So, first Monday of the month, that's a full differential backup there. That's all good. And an incremental backup.
These are just preset options, is it?
Yeah, so this is the schedule that Macrium have built into their system. I can edit it here if I wanted to change the times. I'm a bit of a night owl, so I tend not to be using my computer at 9 in the morning. If I am using any computer at 9 in the morning, it's not this one. It'll be one that my job provides me. So I'm just going to run these backups at those times. Now, one thing that a lot of people might not realize is that if you have a scheduled thing to occur on your computer, whatever that might be, in this case we're talking about backups, if the computer is not powered on, it's not going to happen. Your computer can't magically turn itself on to run a backup at 9 o'clock in the morning. If you leave it in sleep or hibernate, it might do. But that means you're going to be paying a little bit of money for the power that it takes to keep that system in sleep or hibernate. So, keep that in mind. Okay, retention rules. Retention in this situation is how long do we keep these backups for? Do I think I'm going to need to restore my system to a full backup that was taken 6 months ago? Or is the most recent full backup going to be the one I want?
Most recent.
More than likely in my situation, most recent, but that's the question that the software is asking us here, is how long do you want to retain these backups for? Do you need them forever? Do you need, as you said, is there medical data involved here? Is there some crucial piece of information that you cannot bear to lose involved here? You might need to keep the backups for longer. A little slightly off topic here, but a lot of people these days, the biggest worry that you'll have when it comes to the safety of your system is ransomware. So ransomware being a type of malware, or what people might know as a virus, basically is a piece of software that gets onto your computer and it then encrypts the drive. So when it encrypts the drive, it creates a password that only the hacker knows, and you cannot access any files on that drive until you get that password, and they will demand money to give you the password. And that's ransomware. They're holding your data to ransom until you pay them to then release the data. Ransomware is a tricky problem to deal with, because generally the way they operate is that the ransomware, the actual software that gets onto your computer that then encrypts the drive, might be on your computer already and you might not know it. And it might be set to trigger in a month's time, in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time. Or it might just take a long time for it to encrypt the drive, depending on how big the drive is. And if you have a backup that you've taken at the time your system was infected, then restoring to that backup is just going to restore the issue. So you may need to keep a full backup from a long time ago to then restore back to that to a time before your system was infected, because, as I said, it could be 3 or 6 months or longer before the ransomware actually kicks in and starts to affect your system to the point where you cannot use it anymore. I believe, if what I read earlier is correct, Macrium have actual processes and systems in place to prevent a backup from containing ransomware, which is good, but that's usually a feature of paid software and not something that I'm overly concerned about, because I am quite careful with what I do on my computer, but some people aren't. And if you're watching this video and you're interested in setting up backups, maybe it's because you're not as careful as you should be. So keep that in mind.
And some people are just unaware of how careful they need to be.
Yes, precisely. Which is why my very first tutorial was how to set up a virtual machine, so you can be as uncareful or as wild as you want to be within your virtual machine, because you just wipe it out and set up a new one if it all goes wrong. So I'm going to set up fairly lax retention rules here, because, as I said, I'm quite careful with my system. I don't need to keep a full backup from 6 months ago taking up hard drive space on the NAS. So I'm going to keep, we'll say, 4 weeks of full backups. And if we look back at our schedule up here, our full backup is taken every month. So let's say we'll keep every 6 backups. Actually, I'm not going to go with 6. We'll go with 3. 6 would be a lot. 3 backups, which means that's the last 3 months. So once in each month, I should have a full backup taken, and those will be retained.
Very good.
Okay, so the differential backups, I'm going to just keep, we'll say, differentials are going to be taken every week. So we'll say we'll keep 12 backups of differential backups. So that's 12 weeks. So again, about 3 months worth of differential backups. So the difference here, by the way, if it's not clear, a full backup is the entire system image. The differential backup is changes that have been made to that system within that month. So I'm going to be taking a full backup once a month. Differential backups are going to be taken every week. There are going to be incremental backups, which I'm not too concerned about keeping. That's a daily backup. Really, the way to think about this is, how much time could you suffer losing and not lose your mind or lose your whole business or whatever it might be? I could lose a month. It's probably game progress and whatever software I've been tinkering with and things like that, and I could just redo it and spend the time to get back to where I was. But as we mentioned, if there's critical data, patient data, medical records, business records like your budget and that sort of thing, you might want.
Or if you're, as you've identified me, as a digital hoarder who just doesn't like to lose anything.
Exactly. If you're one of those digital hoarders, then just spend all your money on hard drives and back everything up and keep them forever. And this is the menu where you do that. So. We're just going to go a little bit more conservative, keep full 3 backups, and differential keep 12 backups. So that should be 3 months. If my system goes kaput, I'm going to be restoring it within 12 hours of that issue happening, and I'll have a recent enough backup. Run the purge before backup. Any ideas? No, me either. But it's ticked by default, so let's go with it. If I wanted to know more, I would just go to Google and look it up. But you know what? I'm a little bit blasé about the backups here, because it took me 2 days to restore the system. But the first day of that was actually just trying to get Microsoft's own image system working again. It only took a few hours to actually restore the system to the way I like it. So at the end of the day, if it all goes horribly wrong and the backup doesn't work, I'm okay with that. Your mileage may vary. Do what you think is right for yourself. If you want to find out what this is.
The purge before backup. Is that like get rid of the old backup because now you're bringing the new? Yeah, surely that must be what it is it?
Sounds likely, yeah. Sounds about right. Purge the old backup before running the new one, yeah.
As a space saver, maybe. I don't know,
And would you look at that? Look at the next option down. I think you've hit the nail on the head, because purge the oldest backup sets if less than 5 gigabytes.
Hey!
Look at that.
I don't do numbers, but I do words.
Yeah, and like a lot of people get tripped up about these sorts of things where it's a technical term that you don't understand. But if you just read it and try and understand the mindset of the person who wrote the thing that's on your screen, the programmer or the designer of the system, what it is, what the information is, or what the question is that the software is asking you. If you can work that out, you can figure these things out. And if you can't work it out, I'm sure someone on Google already has, and they'll tell you. So we're happy with all of this. If we have less than 5 gigs, we're going to purge, and we're all good. So next, auto verify. So auto verify in this case, or verifying a backup, is the backup valid? Has your computer lost power during the middle of a backup? Did your internet connection get interrupted? Did someone cut the cable? Did your power go out? Whatever it might be. Do you want to verify a backup? Yes, you always want to verify a backup. Backup's no good if it's incomplete, especially in the case of a system image, is what we're talking about here today. Verify the file system is a yes. Auto verify is set to no here, but I'm not concerned again about that. I don't have critical information on the system. That could. So
is this kind of what they're going to tell you? Every time a backup happens, they're going to give you this information. Is it?
No. So this is just a summary of what it is that we've just set up.
Oh, sorry. I beg your pardon. Yeah.
And you will probably get some sort of a log or maybe a report by email, after backups, or you can just open the software and check the backups there.
Yeah, when I worked in the dentist, it was our first protocol in the morning. Check the backup was successful, yes or no. Yeah.
Before you go committing more data to the system, you want to make sure that the last pieces of data that were committed to it have been backed up. Exactly. Yeah. That's it. Good practice in that dental practice.
I know. Yeah, I learned so much.
So we're auto-verifying no, verifying the file system yes, maximum file size is automatic. So maximum file size will relate to the formatting of the hard drive. So some older file formats, specifically FAT32, which if you don't understand what FAT32 is, that's fine. Just understand
I do. That's how I knew about the partitions, because years ago, I can't remember why, but I had to turn some of my laptop hard drive, I had to turn some of it into FAT32 so we could watch through an Xbox or through a PlayStation. I can't remember. It's really vague. Yeah. But I had to format a part of my hard drive to FAT32 years ago, 12 years ago.
And FAT32 is a very old file system, and it's still in use to this day.
Oh,
but
right.
One of the kind of caveats of FAT32 is that the largest file, any single file that you can have on a drive that's partitioned as or formatted as FAT32 is 4 gigabytes. If you have a file that's larger than 4 gigabytes, it cannot go onto a FAT32 disk or partition. So if the drives in my network attached storage were formatted as FAT32, this system, the Macrium Reflect software, would need to take my backup and chop it up into 4 gigabyte chunks so that it could be stored on that drive. It's not a problem I need to deal with, but it is something that some people in certain situations, as you said, there are situations where you still need to use older file systems or older hard drives or an older computer that you just have lying around, and the hard drive happens to be formatted as FAT32. 4 gigabytes is your maximum size. If your backup's larger than that, hopefully the software you're using is smart enough to chop up your backup and then piece it all back together when you need to restore it. So compression is how much do you want to squish the data down, right? I don't tend to worry about compression. As I said, I have plenty of hard drive space on the NAS. If you don't have plenty of hard drive space, you may want to put a more drastic compression in place. But more compression means more complexity to the backup. It also means the backup process will take longer. And it also means that there is a higher chance of a backup not being valid if the compression doesn't work correctly.
Okay.
Password, you can encrypt the backup. Like we mentioned with ransomware, you take the data, you encrypt it, and you stick a password on it so that you can only get to the contents of it once you put in the password. Might be important for some people depending on your use case, not for me. The rest of these, I think, are just, built-in options with the Macrium system. Some of these might be only features that are available in the paid version, like email on success, email on warning, email on failure. So that's your report after a backup has been run, whether it worked or didn't work, or it worked but something wasn't 100% right, that sort of thing. Summary of our schedule, we're happy with. Summary of our retention rules, we're happy with. We spent enough time on them. Our destination is my NAS, as you can see there. What is it that we're backing up here? We're backing up hard disk 3, as we looked at in the very start when we looked at the Macrium system. It's hard disk 3, and it's the entire disk. So we're not looking at any particular drive letter. If I scoot that out of the way, you can see the letter C for this third partition. But we're not just backing that up, we're backing up the entire disk.
Yeah.
So no drive letter involved. The volume, excuse me, the volume. So hard disks are a funny thing. I kind of used the metaphor earlier of a hard disk being like a book, and you chop that book up into different sections, partitions. So volumes are another piece of that puzzle. It's not something that I fully understand personally, to be perfectly honest with you, so I'm not going to try and explain it. But a volume can be thought of like a partition to a certain degree. At least that's worked for me. If you want to know more, Google's your friend, or go sign up at your local college, because that's the sort of stuff that you really need to get into and study properly if you want to understand it. Our file system here is FAT32. Now, that might be worrying, seeing as we've just talked about FAT32 and its limitations and things like that. I'm not concerned about that, because if you look at what it is we're actually looking at, operation 1 of 4
is less than...
No, we have 4 partitions that are being backed up. The file system here refers to the file system of the first partition on the drive, which is a partition that Microsoft created when I installed Windows using their software on this drive. So it's FAT32 because they said it has to be FAT32, and the entire partition is only 100 megabytes in size anyway. So this is not to say that our backup is going to be stored in a FAT32 file system. It's that the file system of the first partition being backed up is FAT32.
It's already FAT32, yeah.
So if we look at operation 2, there is no file system because the 16 megabyte partition here is unformatted, so it doesn't have a file system. It's just blank pages in a book. Operation 3 of 4, the big one. This is the one we care about. It's hard disk 3, which we know is right here, and it's drive letter C. It's our C drive. It's our Windows install. It's your primary partition. It's the big one. It's the most important one. And you can see the file system is NTFS. If you remember, if you ever heard of Windows NT.
Windows NT? No.
Windows NT? No. Okay, so Windows 3.1, which was the first popular version of Windows back in the 90s, was built on MS-DOS.
Oh, yeah.
The building blocks of that, or the kernel from Windows 3.1, was reused in Windows 95, Windows 98, and I believe Windows 2000, if I'm not mistaken. I am mistaken. It was Windows ME, Millennium Edition, that they reused the MS-DOS kernel. They then introduced with Windows 2000 their own kernel. But Windows NT was a more business kind of workstation focused operating system that came along around the same time, and it became known as the NT kernel. So Windows NT, Windows 2000, and then XP and pretty much on from there are all built on NT kernel, and NTFS is the file system that came along with those operating systems. A bit of history for you anyway, if you care. And then go back to our summary for the last bit here. Operation 4 of 4 is our last little 600 megabyte or so recovery partition that Windows creates for you automatically. So you'll now see that next is grayed out, but we have a nice little finish button here. And my guess is that once I click this, it's going to start taking its first full backup of the system. So let's see what happens. It gives you the option, do you want to do it or not? So run the backup now and save the backup definition file. Get the words out. The backup definition file is all the options we've just set up and looked over. So if you want to back up your backup options, your backup definitions, you can back that up. So it's backups and backups and backups. It's backupception. So we're going to create that backup, and we're just going to stick it in, not in documents, but in OneDrive documents.
Okay.
Because that then is backed up to the cloud. So if I wanted to restore my system and also restore the backup procedure to that system, I have an XML file which
Yeah.
has all the definitions that I've just set up for my backups.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
We're
Yeah.
backing up our backups. It's now connecting to my NAS, so it has to connect and authenticate. And then it should be able to run the backup. Now, I hope I'll be able to save these login credentials for the NAS. If not, I will be setting up a separate location or a separate share on the NAS to be able to store the backups in that isn't password protected. But, you know, if it comes to that, that's not something we'll be dealing with today. It's very hard sometimes when you're typing in a password to not say the characters you're typing out loud. But yeah, not a good habit to get into. Backup started, and there we go, away it runs. So we're going to leave that run, and we'll chat for a few minutes. So how did you find the process of setting up the backups?
Yeah, like personally, I think it's something that I would be able to do if I needed to do it. I think for someone who is maybe a little bit less technologically minded than I am, and I'm not very technologically minded, I'm good at what I know, you know, that kind of way.
Of course,
but for someone who is, you know, I think it could be a little bit more complicated. But for someone who is at my level, like, and you've explained it really well. And I have one question for you, though.
Sure.
You are the product of any free service that you use.
Yes.
So why are you so confident in this free service? Like, how do you know they're not going to use all your information? Or sorry,
it's a very good question, and the answer is I'm not. I'm not hugely confident in this, but the point of using this software is to take a system image of my machine. Okay, we've already covered that. Sounds like I'm repeating myself here, but if this all goes wrong, okay, and the system image doesn't work, I've already recovered from that. I've just spent 2 days recovering from that situation, and you know, it didn't kill me, and my computer works again. So I'm, you know, okay to go through that again if needs be. But the reason for this is to not have to go through that again if I don't have to. When it comes to my data, my information, what they could potentially use or steal or sell, I haven't given them any information that isn't pretty much public knowledge. So I've given them my email address to sign up for the software. Email addresses are generally, I wouldn't say public knowledge, but, you know, it's something you give out to other people. That's the whole point of an email address. So it's not something I try to keep overly private. The software that's included within the backup, or the data, I should say, that's included within the backup, like I said, this is not a crucial business machine. I'm not saving information within this that is, you know, private, confidential. Yes, there's stuff I'm not going to show in a video or, you know, broadcast publicly on the internet. But if a company somewhere decides that they want to try and steal my information because I've used their backup software, that'll hit the news headlines. And as I said at the very start of the video, looking for free software through Google, you want to make sure that the source you're reading is one you trust. So that's where the trust comes into it. It loops all the way back to the start. Nice call back to the start of the video, because I like that. But yes.
I was making notes. There's 3 pages of notes here, Slim.
But the whole point of it is that I don't know if this software is fully trustworthy. But the website that recommended it, I would consider to be trustworthy. Now, when I say websites, I did research before recording this. I didn't just, you know, very quickly Google it and go, that one looks okay. I looked up a few different options, and the reason I went with this is because it's free for home use. A lot of the other options, there's I think it's AOMEI or AOMEI, AOMEI, that's how you spell it. They have various pieces of software for backing up and partitioning hard drives and all that sort of stuff. And they're quite good and they're free to use, but it's a time trial. And a time trial is no good for backups. When that trial runs out and the software stops giving you the features that you need, you then have to pay, or you just have to repeat the process with a different software that will give you another free trial. And that's defeating the entire purpose of setting up automatic recurring backups. You don't want to have to revisit this again. You want to set it up and forget about it. You want this to be taken care of for you. So in the event where you have a system failure, a hard drive burns out or dies, you don't have to worry about whether your backups have been running or not. And one thing,
if you have worked with the trial and then the trial runs out and you don't pay, they get to keep your data, I suppose, do they?
I wouldn't think so, no. Well, I mean, it's quite easy to find out how much data is being sent back to any company, because if you look at my screen now, it's backing up all of those partitions on that drive, and it's going to take 3 hours. That's a lot of data. It's 300 gigabytes or so of data. Now, at the same time, we're on a call, which is transmitting data over the internet, and screen sharing over the internet and that sort of thing. Whereas if we go back to our old friend, the task manager here, and look in the performance tab, you can tell how much data is being transmitted across your network by looking at either the Ethernet or Wi-Fi. If you were using Wi-Fi, you'd have an option for that here. And you can see how much data has been sent and received on your network link, as they call it, at any given time. This 140 megabytes per second, that's because my backup's going to somewhere on the network. It's going across the Ethernet link. It's the same cable that delivers my internet connection as the one that connects this computer to the NAS. So that's why there's a huge amount of data there. Now, if I was concerned about that information going to a third party, Macrium or whatever company's software you're using, I would run a backup to a local disk, whether it be an external hard drive or whatever the case may be, first. And as I'm doing that, I could look at the network traffic and realize, okay, my disks are being used, which you can also see in the task manager here, but the network's not.
Okay.
So if you're getting a lot of disk usage when you're taking a backup, that's fine. That's correct. That's what should be happening.
It should be happening, yeah.
But if you're not getting a lot of network usage, that means that all that data is not being sent across the internet. At least not at that point in time.
At that point in time, yeah, exactly. But it's good to know. I would have never known that now, yeah.
Now, the task manager that I have here is, it's the newer iteration of it that is included in Windows 10 and Windows 11. Windows 7 is out of support with Microsoft at this point, so I'm not too concerned about trying to explain to people who are still stuck on Windows 7, how to get this information. You're just going to have to go and Google it and figure it out. But I would hugely recommend upgrading. It should be free to go from 7 to 10, and it should also be free to go from 10 to 11 when the time comes.
I don't think it is anymore. I have an old Windows 7 downstairs, and I think I missed the boat, for the update,
They kind of advertised it as being a time-limited feature, but it still works, believe it or not. There are still ways, and fully legal, Microsoft-approved ways of upgrading from Windows 7 to 10.
That's something I need to look at, because that laptop, let's just say I can't do everything on it, I don't have administrator rights on it, but it's 10 years. It's 10 years old and it's mine,
So the very first thing you want to look at in that case, cause, is getting a backup. Now, as you mentioned, if you don't have administrator rights to that machine, the Macrium software that we've used here today might not be an option. You might not be able to install the software, or the process to actually run the backup might get blocked for needing admin rights or something along those lines. And in those,
there's nothing on it. There's absolutely nothing on it. It's just Google for my TV, so I can stream onto my TV. That's literally it. There's no information on it.
But I could do it. In the situation where someone has a machine that they don't have admin rights to, that they want to back up files off, then you'll be looking at one of the file-based backups. So whether it be Google Drive, OneDrive, the worst case scenario, in my line of work we use a lot of hardened computers, and hardened in that term means that it's very, very hard to get data in and out of those computers. So for instance, if you plug in a USB hard drive or a memory stick, the very first thing the system's going to force you to do is to encrypt it. Because if you're putting information from that business's machine onto an external device, and that external device then gets stolen, You don't want the person who steals it to be able to access that information. So the very first thing you have to do is encrypt it. And if you
sounds like an episode of Homeland.
But if you encrypt files that you then need to access on a non-business computer, you need to be able to decrypt them again. And in the case of backups, when your system's not working properly, you probably won't be able to run the software to decrypt the files. Because I
can't even put OneDrive on it. My own OneDrive won't allow me.
Worst case scenario, if you can plug in an external device without having to encrypt it, if the system isn't hardened to the point of needing to encrypt all external devices, you can just plug in an external hard drive, back up your files and whatever you need to it. Or you can try Macrium if you think you can get it installed, or you can try the Windows built-in backup and restore options. Good luck to you if you manage to do that and you get it working. I couldn't for the life of me. I think I know what the problem was, and it's a failure of the system itself. But as I mentioned earlier, Microsoft don't even recommend using it anymore. So no blame to be placed there. But, worst case scenario, if you have files that are stuck in a computer that you need to get out somehow, email them to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Zip the documents up into zip folders of less than 10 megabytes. 10 megabytes is the kind of general limit for sending and receiving emails. Emails are not designed for transmitting large files. FTP was designed for that. But you can, if you have critical data you need to get, if you can email from that machine and you can attach files, you can just zip it up, pop it out, and email it to yourself. So worst case scenario, when it comes to backing up things, whether it be documents or your entire system, or your DVD collection that you bought and you want to be able to watch digitally and not wear the discs out, or music that you can listen to that you don't want to wear the discs out or the records out if you're an LP collector or vinyl collector. If you can see or hear it, you can back it up. You can stick a camera in front of your computer screen, record and play the DVD, right? You can put a microphone in front of the speakers on your sound system and record the audio of your vinyl, right? There's always a way to do it. It gets tricky when it comes to software like video games, programs like Microsoft Office, that sort of thing. I'm not here to tell you how to pirate those sorts of things or how to get them illegally. I'm just saying that if you can see and hear it, you can back it up somehow.
Yeah, of course.
There are always ways. As I said, in my line of work, we deal with hardened machines where it's very difficult to get data in and out. But if you can display a document on the screen and you have a camera in your pocket, you can snap a photo of it. And there are incredible systems out there with optical character recognition where you can look at a photo and it'll just pull the text out of it for you. Or it'll be able to create a PDF version of that photo. There's many ways to do it. They're usually free. They're built in with OneDrive, and things like that. They're just features of systems that are out there. They're designed for when you're at a meeting and you want to take a photo of the whiteboard at the end of the meeting, and you can then easily send that photo out to people in a nice, handy PDF or doc or Word doc format. But they can be used for nefarious means as well. Snap a photo, document that's on screen.
Nefarious. I love that word.
Exactly. So there's always some way to back things up. If you're stuck in a situation where you have a computer you don't have admin rights to and you have critical stuff you need to get out of it, there's always a way. Always a way. So don't give up hope. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for today.
So,
Our backup here is running away happily. Now, a couple of final thoughts that I would have on this process. Do not run a backup and think that it's valid. Do not take a backup and assume that it's going to work. Okay? Do yourself a favor, run a full backup like what we've done here today. Once the backup is finished, use the backup. Restore your system from that backup. Do not do anything in between the time that the system has been backed up and restored other than make one very small change. And in my situation, the way I would do that is to create a text document on my desktop called test. It's not going to be in the backup because I created it after the backup is completed. But if it's gone when I restore the backup, I know the backup has worked and that the restore process is completed successfully. It's a very simple test and it takes no time at all, but it's very effective. You want to know if your backup has worked. If you take a backup and then you try to restore the backup immediately afterwards to make sure that the backup was valid and successful, but you haven't done anything in between, you're not going to know. If the backup progresses 99% of the way through restoring itself, but then fails and rolls back all the changes, then you'll never know if that backup worked unless you had made a change between taking the backup and trying to restore it. And in my situation, the simplest way I find is to create a blank text document, just call it test, stick it on your desktop, and that should disappear when you restore your backup.
Alternatively, if you pay for the email to come in and say it was all verified and it worked, would that be a substitute?
Now, do you believe it?
That's why I'm asking.
Okay, well, I would say that it's personal preference. It's up to the user. If you want to take the report that's generated by the system as gospel, then yes, that would be considered okay. That may not be a paid feature of this software, by the way, and it's not always a paid feature. The operating system that I run on my home server, which is called Proxmox, has its own backup features included, and I get email reports from those backups. It's just part of the system. Because it's an operating system, it can run its own email server locally on the machine, so it's not resources, computing resources being used by someone else. And that's where the money comes into it, is you're paying someone else for their computing resources. In this situation, with my own home server using Proxmox, everything is hosted locally. It's my electricity bill. I'm paying for it. I paid for the hardware that it runs on. So it sends the emails. In this situation with Macrium, it might be able to generate the email locally from this computer that's currently been backed up. But it may also be that Macrium themselves have to be hosting something on their systems to be able to generate that email report, and they're going to charge you a fee to do that.
Of course,
So I don't know exactly how their business model works. As I said, this is a kind of a warts-and-all guide. It's not even a guide, but just an exploration of how to set these things up and to kind of hopefully sort of explain what a lot of the terminology is and the philosophies behind backups. You know, the most important thing is that you have to do the backup now before you need it. If anyone takes anything away from this,
backup. Take home message. Do the backup.
Backup now before you need it. If you need a backup and you don't have one, it's way too late. You're way past the point of no return.
And 3-2-1. I like 3-2-1.
3-2-1. 3 different backups on 2 different formats or 2 mediums.
And 1 offsite.
And 1 somewhere else offsite. So, and that is true for a lot of things, to be honest, not just computers. If you have family photos, physical photographs that you cannot bear to lose, scan
digital
them.
hoarder.
Scan them, print them out, and put them in a fireproof safe in somebody else's house.
now you're sounding like Monica from Friends with the Nestle Toulouse recipe.
But this is the sort of thing that people don't think about, right? No one wants to imagine what's going to happen if your house burns down. Okay, no one wants to face that reality because it's a horrible situation to be put in. But, you know, people sometimes, you know, play the thought exercise, well, your house is burning down, what do you grab? Oh, the dog or the cat or the child or whatever. And a lot of people's answer to that question is the photo albums.
Photos, you're absolutely right.
Is a very popular answer to that question. And if you want those photos, and these days, the reason I'm, you know, trying to impart this knowledge out to the world is that a lot of people's photos, a lot of those precious memories, that time you're never going to get back, is stored digitally. It's on your phone, it's on your computer. If you don't back it up, your phone gets lost. It's, you know, storage dies, the charging port falls out of it, you can't charge it anymore. Those photos are locked in a black box that you're never getting out. So you need those sorts of things backed up, and you need them backed up in 3 backups, 2 different formats, and 1 of them somewhere else. 3, 2, 1. Don't forget it. And like, as I said, if you have physical things that you need to make copies of, the deeds of your house, birth certificates, those sorts of things, make copies, store them in a fireproof box or safe somewhere else. You know, hopefully most people are in the situation where they have family members who will happily, you know, take ownership of those things and mind them.
So I do that for my parents.
Exactly.
I have all their COVID passports and, you know, the certificates and all that stuff.
I'll stop you there because don't disclose too much of the personal sensitive information to the wider
you know what I
internet
mean.
here.
You know what I mean? Like, they want the physical copy and they're upset that they can't have it. You know, and I'm like, look, I have it. Someone is going to print it, you know, but I still have it there. Don't worry, like, you know.
Exactly. Take backups of everything. A lot of things nowadays are digital, so you want backups of those. But, You know, for the likes of me and you, because we've been on this earth for nearly 40 years or more than 40 years in certain cases, we have things that were pen and paper or physical photographs you had to get out of a pharmacy. If you want those backed up, make copies, put them somewhere safe. And, you know, in the eventuality that your house burns down, or, you know, you get old and you get forgetful and you can't remember where they are, hopefully you'll remember where one of the copies is, you know. So back everything up and do it now before it's too late.
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
I think that's a good note to end on. So,
thanks for having me.
Thank you very, very much for being here. And we'll hopefully do this again. We're looking to cover more topics, whatever they may be. If you have any ideas for things you'd like to know more about, whether it be in this more podcasty, off-the-cuff format or a more streamlined, defined tutorial, let us know in the comments down below. If you want to see more like this, subscribe. And with that, we're out.